Welcome, everyone. I am Bob Wurzelbacher, Director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our video podcast series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena. We'll hear a personal story from someone deeply affected by that issue. And finally, we'll share ways that you can get involved. This month, we're talking about finding life through loss. And this week, we're talking about losing a child to terminal illness. And as always, we have a special guest. Will you please introduce yourself?
Thank you for inviting me, Bob. My name is Joan Stoltz, and I currently work at St. Maximilian Kolbe Parish in Liberty Township, and I am the education consultant there. I'm married to Tim. We've been married 34 and a half years, and we have 5 children, 2 of whom are praying for us in heaven. Our third child, we lost to a miscarriage. We then suffered some secondary infertility. So after 3 or 4 years, we adopted our 2 youngest children, Andre and Victoria, from Russia. And we just celebrated Gotcha Day this week. So 17 years that we brought them home. And they are brother and sister. And Victoria was 4 and Andre was 3. And our adoption story is a whole other story. But this story today is about Victoria.
All right, Joan, well, thanks for being on the show. So why don't you share with us your story?
Victoria was a normal high school freshman girl. She had just celebrated her 15th birthday. Her passion was volleyball. She was not tall, but she was strong and agile. And so she played the back row. Just to show you how strong she was, she could do a handstand push-up. And she loved to arm wrestle her brothers.
Wow.
She played saxophone in the band. She was working on her gold award for Girl Scouts. And because she had known hunger and poverty, that was what her gold award was just shaping up to be, that she wanted to do something in that area. She was involved in our church youth group. She loved shoes, shopping, selfies, and her favorite show was Say Yes to the Dress. She had hundreds and hundreds of wedding dresses pinned on her Pinterest page. She wanted to get married. She was our giggler. She was our squealer, and she just loved birthday parties. So that is our Victoria.
Wow.
Just 2 weeks after her 15th birthday, June 19th of 2014, we actually the previous day had done a day of retreat with Rua Woods on theology of the body. That night she played sand volleyball. In the morning, early in the morning, around 4 or 5 in the morning, she woke up sick and had a headache. And we, do what you normally do, cold washcloth, those kinds of things. I ran to let the dog out. She was kind of comfortable. And when I came back, she was unconscious. They took her, we called 911, and we went to Children's Hospital in Liberty Township, and they thought it was an overdose. So that's the first scary thing, is a lot of times when teens come in, that is the first thing that they think is overdose.
Right.
And after a CT scan, they realized that she had had a stroke.
Wow.
They wanted to air care her to main campus Children's, but the helicopter was not at the hospital and time was of the essence. And so they decided that taking her by squad would be the fastest way. When we got there, she was immediately put into ICU. And somehow, because I had called a couple of people to pray, our parish priest met us there. He was there very shortly afterwards. Because time was of an essence, they couldn't wait for an operating room. They actually had to put something into her brain, and they did that right there in her room to try to relieve some of the pressure. She spent 4 or 5 days on a ventilator, not talking or doing anything. We didn't really know what the damage was. It was a very happy and joyous day when she opened her eyes. It wasn't for probably a long time, a week, before we realized that she had had a stroke and what the damage was. She lost part of her right side, her speech, cognitive, vision, lots of different things that unfolded as we went through those first weeks in ICU.
Even in hindsight, there wasn't anything before that day
Nothing.
she was complaining about that gave all of a sudden she just has this stroke.
Yes, that's correct. There was no signs. No. We spent 6 weeks in Children's Hospital that summer, where she battled to regain the use of her right leg, her right arm, and to find words again. We were hopeful. When she came home, we had a sign in the yard and our neighbors gathered. And I would say that that was a very joyful day that she got to come home, because she was really looking forward to that. She did start attending volleyball practices because school was about to start, but she could not go to school because she had no short-term memory. So she could eat, and then 15 minutes later, she'd say, "I'm hungry." She didn't remember that she had eaten.
Right.
So it was hard to go to school. So our volleyball coach allowed her to come to volleyball. I would go with her, and we would practice on the side, doing things if she could do sit-ups, or if she was still trying to get her strength back. So we were doing things like that. And then September 30th at practice, she had a headache. We left early, came home. She slept that night, woke up the next morning with an even more severe headache. And we went back to the hospital, and that's when they found out there was a brain tumor. So it took us from June until October 1st until we knew what had happened and what was the cause of all this, that it was a brain tumor.
She had difficulty communicating, obviously, but was there a lot of cognitive loss during that time? Did she realize what was going on with her? Was she aware, like she knew that she had lost a
Yes.
lot of abilities, and she was
Yes.
also dealing,
Yes.
all of you were, in addition to her, dealing with, okay, I can no longer do what I used to be able to do.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So 2 days later, they did brain surgery to see what kind of tumor it was. And then we waited the weekend, a long wait, and it was malignant, it was aggressive, and it was inoperable. And so over the next few days, we learned what that meant realistically. And we were told that people with this type of brain tumor, less than 25% make it 18 months.
Wow.
So we knew, they said 12 to 18 months.
Even at that age.
I would say our first lesson was hope. We're both strong Catholics, and so we hoped for a miracle because we believe in a God of miracles, and we never let go of that hope. And that was what pushed us through everything, is that hope that she could be cured here. If not, she was going to be cured in heaven.
Right.
And that was our hope. The verse that I really clung to was Romans 5, verses 3-5. We also boast in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, which has been given to us. And so that verse was really important because we clung to hope. So for the next 15 months, we lived and we died at the same time. And that's hard, I think, for people who are not going through it to understand that even though you are living, you're also grieving. So the grief process started the moment they said, this is malignant.
Right.
You begin to grieve through it. And so by the time you get to the end of it, you've had all this time of grieving, which it's hard for someone who hasn't walked that to understand. Our time then revolved around, we went to Children's Hospital main campus once a week for blood work tests to see the doctor. She did 33 rounds of radiation. We did chemotherapy. We had, unfortunately, many 911 calls because she had developed seizures. So we took squad car rides. We did air care. It was a very traumatic time. I was blessed, and I think God puts people in your life for a reason or a season. And my son's best friend, his mom was my friend, but we weren't close. But she had walked with another friend through their loss of a son having a brain tumor. And she stepped into our life in an amazing way. And she said to me at the beginning, cherish, cherish. And so that became our word for that whole journey, was we cherished every moment that we had. That was how we lived. We just continued to cherish. I think the other thing that we did is we learned to focus on the little things and to let go of the big. So we couldn't change the big that she had this brain tumor, but we could celebrate she made it down the steps. We
Right.
could celebrate she learned to write her name. We could celebrate playing games. Going down to the hospital one day a week was hard. So we developed the habit of going to a drive-through place and getting a drink. And that's how developed we would buy for the people behind us. And she loved that. She loved to buy for the people behind us. And sometimes we'd have to get back in line and do it again
Ah,
because she loved that. Even on her anniversary of her death, many people will do the drive-through difference for Victoria.
wow, that's really cool. You've already kind of answering some of these questions. You talked a lot about laying on hope. You talked a lot about that word cherish the moments you have, right?
Mhm.
So was that the answer to the question, or is there more you want to share about, like, how do you find the strength to get through those really hard times, those moments of when you, of course, you find out that your daughter has a terminal illness. You're hoping for a miracle, but you're being told nothing we're going to do is going to cure this. This is just, I guess, going to extend her life perhaps a little longer. That's why you're doing chemotherapy and such. There's so many losses, right? You have other kids. How old are these other kids, and how are they dealing with the time necessarily to take care of this one child and the
So
things and the limitations?
our other children at the time, Andre, her biological brother, is just a year behind her. So she had just turned 15. He actually just a couple of days earlier had turned 14. Our two older children at the time would have been 24 and 21.
Okay.
Our 24-year-old was just starting his career, getting ready to move away. Our 21-year-old was in college at UC. She was actually away at a co-op experience. She was an engineer. So neither of those two were around. So yes, lots of different things. I would say practically, the first thing I did the very first night we were in the hospital was starting a Care Pages. It was Care Pages then, Caring Bridge, some kind of way to communicate with people, because it took the pressure off us having to tell everybody
Right.
over and over again. So that's something I think has become very common for people to use. It also helped us give ways for people to help us so we could communicate through that. Another lesson we learned through this was to celebrate life. And we did this when she was sick in the hospital and they had found the brain tumor. And that was a pretty tough 10 days. That summer before she had the stroke, we had said that we were going to redo her bedroom. You know, she had her bedroom done when she was like 9, and now she's 15. So she wanted to redo her room. So while she was in the hospital, that was kind of a carrot that we held out to her and said, when you get home, we're going to do that. Because she had like picked out the bedspread. This is where people can step in. And this was amazing. So we decided to do it like an extreme makeover. And so she would be surprised. Well, we didn't get it coordinated before she came home. So she came home and she actually moved into a different bedroom, and we kept the door closed, and neighbors and friends came and painted, and they put up molding and they chose the decorations. And it was so incredible what people did. And I still have the video of when she walked into that room, and she was so excited to see it. She was just beaming. And it's just those little things that people, I couldn't believe that I would have to take her to therapy and there would be people in my house painting her bedroom. Just
Right.
incredible.
Right.
So I guess going back to celebrating, here's something people can do that my friend wanted to do for me, the friend who she really stepped into our lives. She would go to doctor's visits with us. She just sat in the corner, but if there was a question that we missed, she would ask it. And it was invaluable to have someone who did that for us. She wanted to rent a limo for Victoria's last radiation. And I kind of said, oh, I don't know, because I knew that wasn't really, there wasn't a celebration because it wasn't going to end well. But she kind of pushed, and there were people who went in on that who really I didn't know. And I would say that to your listeners, celebrate along the way those things that you can celebrate. Because that is another great memory our family has of this. My oldest son actually went and helped pick out. So he picked out Victoria's favorite color, pink. So we had a big pink limo for the last day of radiation. We went to school and got her friends. She had a group of 8 friends, and they all went to radiation with her that day. And as we drove into school, they had put in cups on the fence of the baseball field, "We love you, Victoria."
Wow.
And just incredible. And we toasted at radiation with sparkling juice, and we went to dinner. And what memories we have of that. So I would definitely say find the way to celebrate along the way, to make memories. And so you have those things to cherish afterwards.
Right. So this is a celebration of the last day of radiation. Just thinking of what it is that we can celebrate. So that starts to answer the question. So when you have a friend, someone close, or even maybe a family member is going through some loss like this, and you don't know what to do, you don't know how to reach out, you don't want to, if you will, remind them. You hear this, right? People say, well, I don't want to remind them of what they're going through. Not that they're going to forget. But anyway, how do we reach out? Often people say the phrase, well, let me know if you need anything. But you can tell me from experience, right, that that's not very helpful, right? So how do you reach out to a loved one who's going through this?
Lots of different ways. This one friend she happened to be empty nester. Like I said, her oldest son was my son's age. She would daily ask me, "How can I help you today?" That's a question that you have to answer. How can I help you today? I had other people who would just drop off soup and say, "Soup's on the porch," or "Soup's in your refrigerator." We had so many people who had our garage code that they could get in. The neighbor could get them into our house. Someone arranged meals for us. Of course, I've got a 14-year-old at home. I'm not here. So people inviting him to go with them on activities, people taking him for dinner, carpooling him. He was in band. He had to get back and forth to school. So many things that people could do for us, those kinds of just menial things. Walk the dog. The dog needs to be walked. Clean the house. People arranged to clean our house. Because at that point, when she was in the hospital, we were doing 12-hour shifts. So my husband would go about 5 o'clock and stay until about 6 in the morning. Then I would come in the morning and stay until the evening. So that was our routine. So having meals at home if we got there and we wanted to eat, or we could pack it and take it with us, because even though she's in the hospital, she's getting food, but you aren't getting food. So at Children's Hospital, you can buy meal cards. People would buy meal cards and send them to our room. So then we could buy food from the cafeteria. So that helped as well. One thing that our priest said to us that really helped, because I've done most of my ministry at St. Maximilian, I'm well known there, our family is well known. He gave us permission, or suggested that we attend a different church for a while, because it was so overwhelming. We would be swarmed with people, especially in the beginning, wanting to know, how's Victoria? What's going on? What's the status? And it just became so draining. And so I would say for that first summer, we did attend another parish so we could be more anonymous and we could worship. And then I will say, as she progressed in her illness and she became wheelchair bound, we went to church up until the very week that she passed. And those who were at that mass that we attended could see how, she couldn't get out of the chair. They had to bring a little bit of communion to her. She couldn't use her hands. It became like that. And I would think those are some awesome ways. And people step up in ways that you don't even realize or think about. Her volleyball coach was incredible in including Victoria in practices all the way through. So she would designate when Victoria was able to do, like I said, she could do some sit-ups, or we could do something on the side. That was fine. But as she grew worse, and the tumor then affected her right side, so she did lose the use of her arm, lost the use of her leg again. She designated a girl each time they had practice. Every day, if we wanted to come, we came. I would stay with Victoria, and it was like a special time. They got out of practice to be with Victoria, and we would be at the other side of the gym, and we would be playing volleyball. Like we had a beach ball. So Victoria wanted to bump the ball, but she couldn't see the ball. So she could try to hit a ball, bump the ball. When it got so bad that Victoria couldn't do that, then it was game time, and we sat in the bleachers, and they could just talk with her. So all the way through. And even then she organized girls to come to our house and play games, because through it all, Victoria loved to play games. And she knew dominoes before she had the stroke, so she could continue to play dominoes. And so they would come, and even girls came who didn't know Victoria, like the freshmen who didn't know her, came and played games with her. That was a treat to them. And so the coach organized all this, and she'd just send me the week schedule. So-and-so's coming this day, so-and-so's coming this way. Incredible help.
Wow. So basically, be creative. Think about what people need. Ask them more specifically what they don't just say, call me if you need me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what can I do for you today?
Mm-hmm.
Or even more, can I bring you a meal today? Does your son need to be driven somewhere? Right? These kinds of more specific things. It never even occurred to me. It actually did not occur to me, but it makes so much sense that going to your parish can actually become overwhelming. I totally get the caring bridge thing. I know a lot of people who use that, and why that is so helpful, because you don't want to tell everybody a million times
Right.
what's going on. But showing up for church on Sunday, yeah, that makes sense. That could be good advice, to just go to a different church for a while. Your friends are keeping up with you on Caring Bridge, and your friends are keeping up with you if they're delivering meals or whatever, but you're not overwhelmed with all eyes on you when you're just trying to go to church. Do you want to share what those final weeks or days were like?
Like I told you, she was working on her Gold Award, and it was about hunger and poverty. Make-A-Wish Foundation did come to us and wanted to grant a wish. We had already early on done a family trip, and so we didn't feel like she was well enough to do something like that, and didn't feel like we needed that. So we decided and with Victoria, that we would continue her Gold Award. And she wanted to feed the hungry, and she wanted to help people who were less fortunate. So at that time, we were in the midst of a huge sock, mitten, and hat donation that was happening out of my house. So she's in the family room, and the bed is now in our family room, and there are volunteers in the living room sorting all of these things. And so there were so many people in and out that last week, and the physical therapists and people came to our home then toward the end for therapy. And I didn't know it was coming. I know that sounds unbelievable, but I knew it was coming, but I didn't know it was coming. And she probably on Sunday or so lost her ability to speak. She stopped eating. And this is an incredible story. On Monday night, she opened her eyes and she looked at me and she said, "Body of Christ." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Body of Christ." I said, "You want communion?" And she nodded. Okay, I tried to call someone. The next morning, I hadn't got anybody that night. The next morning, she said, "Body of Christ." And I called church. I said, "Someone needs to get here."
Right.
And that was her last. That was on a Tuesday, and she ended up passing Saturday morning.
Right. She knew what she wanted and needed at
Yeah.
that last time. That is an incredible story.
Yeah. And at that time, so the Make-A-Wish grew into something much bigger. She ended up going down to Prince of Peace Parish in Lutheran Church down in Cincinnati. A whole other God story about how that ended up happening, because during her illness, this is another thing, she said she wanted to feed the hungry. And she kept saying that to me. I want to do this. And I thought, how am I going to work this out? I called church because I knew the secretary's husband was involved with a homeless project here. Well, the secretary wasn't there, but the substitute person said, I told her who I was looking for and why. She said, "Well, I go down to Prince of Peace every week. I would be happy to take your daughter." And so Victoria's relationship started with Prince of Peace Parish Lutheran Church down in Cincinnati. She went every week. She was so excited. They went and she served donuts, and then they made lunch and she served lunch. And through that relationship came her Make-A-Wish. And they have a nonprofit called Welcome Home Collaborative here in Cincinnati, where they buy homes and try to help people who are trying to help themselves out of poverty. And so Victoria's House of Hope became a reality. And so it is downtown on Duncan Street, called Victoria's House of Hope. And it houses right now 2 single moms.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Victoria saw the house when it was bought. It was just bought about a week before she died. So she never saw it complete, but that would be something I would say to families working on that house, because it took 6 months of thousands of hours of volunteer time to rehab that house. And it helped us grieve,
Yeah.
and to make her dream come alive is an incredible thing. It really helped a lot of people to make Victoria's House of Hope come a reality. And even if people want to drive by, it's on Duncan Street, because 2 years later, Pastor John had a vision that he wanted a mural, like Cincinnati has murals. And he continued to pursue that dream and found an artist out of Nebraska who came and did a 3D mural that's on now the side of the home. And it features Victoria's picture.
Here's the website, right?
Yes.
At
Yeah.
welcomehomecollaborative.org.
Yeah.
And if you go click on Victoria's House of Hope, you can see some beautiful pictures of her and the side of the house that you're talking about. And there it is. There's a shot of the mural, I guess, that's on that house, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you can check online if you want to see more of that. If you're driving, listening to the podcast, and when the next time you're seated, just go to catholicaoc.org/beingprolife, and you'll have the link on the bottom of that page as well to the welcomehomecollaborative.org, where you'll find Victory's House of Hope. All right, great. Okay, terrific. Maybe some real quick words on someone has gone through this significant loss of a family one, and now they're trying to move on and they feel stuck. They don't know what to do. They can't get past the grief. What resources can you point them to, or what can you recommend that they do to try to find the hope and the joy in the situation?
I would say what served me well and would be a good lesson is to learn how to mourn. I had walked with a friend whose daughter had passed away at 17 years before. And so she taught me how to mourn and how to be able to say yes to things and to be able to say, no, I can't do that right now. I used so many organizations like Companions on a Journey, which is a bereavement group. I attended their group sessions. I did a New Beginnings class, which was a closed grief support, like an 8-week class. I did one at Good Shepherd Church, another closed one. So there's different types of grief support. There are those that are closed. So that means it's a closed period of time, 6 to 8 weeks, and it's closed membership. So that means that on week 3, no one else is going to join. You only have to tell your story once. And sometimes that's what's so hard about grief support groups is every time a new member comes in, you have to retell your story because they want to be acquainted with you. So there's 2 different kinds of grief support to look for. I would also say Fernside is a great organization. They deal with families, and we did go to Fernside with Andre. My older children, one of them did personal counseling. The other support that I found afterwards was the Cancer Support Community in Blue Ash. They also offer support groups as you journey through, and that's the Cancer Support Community.
As always, you go to our website and we'll have those down at the bottom on resources. Okay. Anything I should have asked you, or do you just want to close out with?
I think the thing that I would say to keep living through the illness and after that person is gone, that life does go on and that you keep having to move forward. And what we learned from Victoria, because this is something she was never discouraged. She was always grateful. If you had to get up in the middle of the night because we had a baby monitor, she couldn't get out of bed by herself toward the end and help her, she would say, thank you, thank you. And so I would say just gratefulness. And everybody who met her said that. She was just so grateful and she was just joyful. And I think you asked me about the blessings. Through this horrible ordeal, I learned what agony is. But I also think that we were given the gift of seeing Victoria for her true, pure self that God created her to be without the influence of our culture. She was so loving. She was so joyful. She was so thankful. And she was, I think, prepared to go to heaven from what she could tell me and how she could communicate.
That's incredible, Joan. Yeah, because right, you describe her in the beginning as some of the things that the world would look at. She was so pretty, she was so smart, she was a great athlete, and then you see at the end of her life how beautiful the soul is. You really see how grateful she is, how thankful she is, right? How loving she is, the things that really matter. Ready to meet Jesus. That is such an incredible story.
That there is dignity in life all the way through, no matter that she couldn't get out of bed by herself, that she couldn't go to the bathroom by herself, that there was the pureness of beauty there. So true.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for talking with us today, Joan, for sharing your story on the loss of your daughter, Victoria, and how we can all better reach out to those who experience this kind of loss. So thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for allowing me to share how God has worked in our lives.
And I want to thank all our viewers and listeners for tuning in on this episode of our Being Pro-Life series. Head to the website to view more resources talked about in this episode at www.catholicaoc.org/be-pro-life. Thank you again for joining us today. I look forward to being with you next time.